extravagant lies we've ever heard in our lives on this episode.
Hello. For years, Game's been out here telling stories that just don't line up, and it's finally catching up to him. What's wild is, it's not even the fans calling him out anymore. It's other rappers. From flashing a clearly photoshopped pic with Tupac to claiming he wrote 50 Cent's legendary "What Up Gangsta."
He lie. Everybody know he lie. But they be good lies though.
They do be good lies.
They
Like
be like
what?
great
The Tupac
lies.
picture.
That was one of the best.
The industry is there's a lot of snakes in it. Game was a snake that
The cap is getting out of control. The drama really exploded when Game boldly claimed he had a hand in writing part of "What Up Gangsta." That's not just any song. That track opened "Get Rich or Die Tryin'," the album that made 50 Cent untouchable. That record set the tone for a whole new era in hip-hop, full of danger, hunger, and raw street energy.
You
That's
photoshopped
not
yourself
fair.
on someone else and put a picture out with you and Pac.
It's Pac.
But it's not you. You heard him say Kanye did more for me in the last 2 weeks than
So for Game to act like he helped write that classic, he better come with some real proof, not just talk. When the question came up in an interview, 50's reaction said everything. He didn't argue, didn't even try to clap back. He just laughed. That cold grin told the whole story.
Said he wrote "What Up Gangsta."
What up, gangster? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, come on, bro. He wasn't even around when we did that. Like, that was before you even came into the picture. Like, that's Get Rich or Die Trying. He didn't even
Coming to after that.
Yeah.
His body language screamed, "Are you serious right now?" Because for 50, "What Up Gangsta" wasn't just a song. It was his soul, his pen, his energy. Game was nowhere near that creative process, not even close. And Tony Yayo, who was right there in the studio when the magic was happening, didn't hold back either. His response was razor sharp. "You didn't write nothing."
Was music that I made with Dre, not with Game. How We Do, Hate It or Love It, Church for Thugs, Special, Higher, West Side.
No sugarcoating, no Hollywood smiles, just straight truth. That moment hit deep because it didn't just expose a lie. It tore down a whole narrative Game's been selling for years. According to 50, Game had zero involvement in "What Up Gangsta." None.
time Dre dropped 2001. Game lyric, right?
Yeah, that was a lyric.
Are you about to tell me
Wait.
that 2001 didn't come out in 2001?
It did not.
Came out in
And if we're keeping it real, his whole rise might not have even happened without 50 and Dr. Dre backing him from the jump. Dre handpicked the beats, 50 laid down the hooks, and G-Unit sprinkled their sound all over the documentary. The whole structure was built before Game even touched the mic. Think about it. Hate It or Love It and How We Do, two of Game's biggest hits, were originally 50's tracks.
He's hurt. See, in hip hop, we very rarely do we look past the.
They didn't just help him rise, they made him. Dre's golden ear, 50's pen, and that G-Unit cosign shot him straight from the Compton underground to the global stage. From West Side Story to Special, the blueprint was right there, perfectly crafted before Game tried to make it his own.
You
That's not
photoshopped
fair.
yourself on someone else and put a picture out with you and Pac.
It's Pac.
But it's not you.
So when he later tried to rewrite history and claim he shaped 50's legacy or built his own rise without Dre and G-Unit's help, it wasn't just a small exaggeration, it was straight up disrespect. You're talking about legends. 50 and Dre built empires, while Game's been out here photoshopping memories and rewriting history like people wouldn't notice. This isn't just embarrassing, it's humiliating.
$4,000 for a verse. So I made a beat for him to rap over, and he was gonna record a verse and then send it back to me for $4,000. I thought it was legit because I previously paid him to post one of my new.
That's exactly why Game's claim hit so hard. It wasn't just random fans doubting him this time. It was his own former allies putting him on blast for the world to see. Once that happened, the floodgates opened. Everyone started asking the same question. So what else has he been lying about? And that question led straight into one of the wildest, most confusing chapters in Game's entire story. The night he got shot. If his messy fallout with 50 Cent made people suspicious, his constantly changing shooting story made them flat out doubt everything. For years, Game has told a dramatic story about how he was ambushed inside his own home back in 2001. He said he got hit multiple times, slipped into a coma, and woke up days later with a new fire to chase rap greatness. On the surface, it sounded like the perfect redemption arc, the kind of story hip-hop eats up. A man takes bullets, faces death, and comes back with bars. That's movie-level drama right there. But the issue isn't if he got shot. That part's real. The hospital records and news reports confirm it happened. The problem is how that story keeps changing every few years like he's revising a movie script. One version he says it was 5 shots. Another time, it jumps to 7. In one interview, he's bleeding out alone for hours. In another, his brother rushes in like a hero and saves him on the spot. Even the coma length keeps flipping. 3 days in one story, weeks in the next. At some point, it stops sounding like raw truth and starts sounding rehearsed. Then came the lyric that exposed a serious crack in his whole timeline. I woke up out the coma, 2001. That line hit hard, but here's the problem. Dr. Dre's 2001 album dropped in 1999. The math just doesn't add up. And when your entire image is built on being authentic, slip-ups like that aren't small mistakes. They're huge red flags. Fans, critics, and even industry insiders caught it immediately. Joe Budden couldn't resist clowning him either. He laughed at how Game's story seems to magically adjust every time he tells it. To a lot of people, this wasn't about questioning whether Game actually got shot. It was about him trying too hard to turn his experience into the West Coast version of 50 Cent's 9-shot legend. It's like he wanted his pain to sound cinematic, not real. And when your brand is all about real, that's dangerous territory. When your personal trauma becomes your entire brand, every inconsistency becomes a landmine. Each detail that shifts makes people wonder, if he's lying about that, what else is fake? And by this point, Game had already taken 2 massive credibility hits. First, claiming he helped 50 write, "What Up Gangsta?" And now, twisting up the details of his own near-death story. But he wasn't done yet. Years later, Game took it to a whole new level of wild. He didn't just bend the truth anymore. He turned his aim at Dr. Dre, the very man who built his entire career. That move shocked everybody. After all the heat he'd already faced, the origin story lies, the shooting inconsistencies, the confusion over Kanye and Dre, you'd think he'd keep things clean. But nope. Instead, Game made one of the most controversial statements of his entire career. It all started when he tried to compare himself to Kanye West, and what came next lit social media on fire. Game claimed something so bold, so out of pocket, that even longtime fans couldn't believe he said it. This wasn't just another headline. It was the moment Game officially crossed a line that even hip-hop couldn't ignore. What Game said next wasn't just bold, it was betrayal. Fans and insiders couldn't believe it. Whether you buy into all his wild stories or not, one thing nobody can deny is that Dr. Dre built Game's entire rise from the ground up. Dre was the architect behind everything, the deals, the beats, the blueprint. Back in 2003, Dre signed Game to Aftermath, handed him elite production, gave him mentorship that money can't buy, and smartly placed him beside 50 Cent and G-Unit to skyrocket his career. With Jimmy Iovine pushing the vision behind the scenes, Dre crafted a rollout so perfect it was unstoppable. The result? The documentary. A 5-time platinum album, Grammy nominations, and a permanent stamp in hip-hop history. None of that happens without Dre's hand guiding it. He wasn't just a producer, he was the mastermind who made Game matter. So when Game made that shocking statement comparing himself to Kanye and downplaying Dre's role, the hip-hop world exploded. Tony Yayo didn't waste a second firing back. He hit Game with cold, public truth. You got a career because of Dr. Dre. You even said on record, "What the fuck am I without a doctor?" That line hit like a bullet. Yayo wasn't being petty. He was reminding everyone that Game's whole empire came from Dre's genius. For someone whose entire career was born out of Dre's vision, turning around and making those kinds of claims wasn't just reckless, it was disrespectful. Fans called it ungrateful, and industry vets saw it as biting the hand that fed him. Yayo even doubled down, saying, "So what are you talking about?" That question echoed across the internet like a warning shot. Game's comment didn't just sound bitter, it sounded like he forgot where he came from. And the real question everyone started asking was why? Why would Game, of all people, take shots at the man who built him? The answer might go back to one painful moment, the 2022 Super Bowl halftime show. That historic performance brought together Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Kendrick Lamar, Mary J. Blige, and even 50 Cent. But not Game. His absence was loud, like silence that screamed betrayal. At first, Game tried to play it cool, pretending he didn't care about being left out. But later, in interviews and podcasts, the mask slipped. He admitted it cut deep. Being excluded from that moment left him feeling betrayed by both Dre and 50. That infamous line, "Kanye did more for me than Dr. Dre ever did," wasn't born from facts. It came straight from pain and pride colliding. But pain doesn't erase damage. Once those words were out there, the fallout was brutal. Even when Game tried to walk it back later, blaming it on being drunk, emotional, or misunderstood, the scar was already there. He even admitted Dre opened doors no one else could, and that he should have shown more respect. But by then, the moment was gone. In hip-hop, you can't play with loyalty, especially not when it comes to a legend like Dr. Dre. Once you cross your mentor, there's no undoing that stain. To fans, this wasn't just another emotional outburst. It was proof that Game's credibility had cracked again. From his rewriting of history to this public betrayal, it's like every time he tries to prove himself, he ends up digging the hole deeper. First, Game clashed with 50 Cent. That alone sent shockwaves through the industry. Then his shooting story started to unravel right in front of everyone's eyes. And just when people thought he couldn't dig the hole any deeper, he started taking shots at Drake. Each controversy chipped away at his image piece by piece until the West Coast hero started to look like a man rewriting his own history just to stay in the headlines. But instead of cooling off and letting things settle, Game doubled down, and it blew up in his face. Trying to keep himself tied to West Coast royalty, he made one of the biggest fumbles of his career. He tried to tap into Tupac's legacy, but not with respect, not with grace. He did it in a way that had fans shaking their heads. A photoshopped picture suddenly started floating around online. Game standing shoulder to shoulder with Tupac, like they had actually crossed paths in real life. At first glance, some fans fell for it, thinking it was some rare throwback moment from the 90s. If it were real, it would have been powerful. A passing of the torch moment, proof that Game was Pac's spiritual heir. But the internet doesn't miss, and people started zooming in fast. Fans began picking apart every pixel. The shadows didn't match, Pac's chain looked badly pasted, and the proportions were off. Within hours, the truth came out. The photo was fake. One fan summed it up perfectly. "It's Pac, but it's not you." That single line went viral. What was supposed to be a powerful tribute turned into a full-blown meme. Blogs roasted it, forums lit up, and suddenly, Game didn't look like a legend. He looked desperate, like he was trying to force a connection that wasn't real. The timing couldn't have been worse either. He had just alienated Dr. Dre, his credibility was already sliding, and now even Pac's die-hard fans, the same ones who usually embrace tributes, turned on him. To them, Tupac wasn't just a legend, he was sacred. Messing with his image, even with good intentions, felt straight up wrong. One fan said it best, if Pac was alive, he wouldn't need Photoshop. That single comment cut deep, because it was true. Real recognizes real. And that move didn't feel real at all. For someone trying so hard to prove his authenticity, Game ended up exposing just how fragile his image had become. But here's where things get complicated. Not everything Game did came from a place of lies or beef. Some of it came from something deeper, a hunger, a desperate need to stay relevant in a game that's constantly changing. That hunger made him chase headlines, latch onto bigger names, and stir tension just to keep his name buzzing. He wasn't just fighting for respect anymore. He was fighting not to be forgotten. That drive pushed him from Dre's shadow, past Pac's ghost, and straight into the orbits of two of the biggest names in modern rap, Kendrick Lamar and Eminem. And like clockwork, with Game, those connections always turned into chaos. Feuds weren't the exception for him. They were the pattern. When it came to Kendrick, things started off all love. There was mutual respect, a big brother, little brother type of energy. Kendrick even gave Game a heartfelt salute on Black Boy Fly, describing how he watched Snoop pass the torch to him and acknowledging Game as part of that same West Coast lineage. That was real respect right there. They shared stages, collaborated, and for a while, it looked like Game had finally found his piece. The bridge between generations, connecting eras of Compton greatness. But if you know Game's history, peace never lasts long. When he's not at the center of drama, he finds a way to create it. And soon, the same pattern that tore down his earlier relationships started creeping in again. Jealousy, comparisons, and the need to prove he's still that guy. What started as admiration between him and Kendrick slowly turned into tension, and the cycle was about to repeat itself all over again. But here's the thing, Game's got a history, and if there's one thing about him, it's that respect is never enough. No matter how much love he gets, he always finds a way to stir things up. Soon, whispers started spreading that he was downplaying Kendrick Lamar's skills, whether it was out of jealousy, competition, or just the need to keep his name ringing. And if that sounds familiar, that's because we've seen this same movie before, with Eminem. At first, Game couldn't stop praising him. He called him the only rapper nobody wants a problem with. Even admitted, "I used to think Eminem was better than me." That was real admiration back then, pure respect from one artist to another. But fast forward a few years, and the tone changed completely. Suddenly, Game was brushing off Eminem's relevance, throwing slick jabs, and even challenging him to a versus battle. It didn't sound like confidence. It sounded calculated, like he was trying to manufacture smoke just to stay talked about. That's the cycle with Game. Admiration turning into rivalry, over and over again. And it played out with both Kendrick and Eminem. The tension hit its peak during the Kendrick versus Drake feud, when Game shocked fans by publicly siding with Drake. He called him my brother, while skipping a West Coast Unity concert Kendrick hosted. That move said everything. Instead of standing with his coast, he chose clout over loyalty. And with Eminem, it got even more blatant. He tried to bait one of the most untouchable rappers in hip-hop into a lyrical war that never happened. He dropped disses, hinted at competition, and hyped up interviews like something big was coming. But M didn't bite. He stayed quiet, focused, unbothered. Because when you're at the top, you don't wrestle with noise from below. In both cases, the result was the same. Game ended up on the outside looking in. When Kendrick hit that Super Bowl halftime stage in 2022 with Dre, Snoop, and Eminem, the world was watching. And Game. He was nowhere to be found, left out again. That had to sting, and he didn't even try to hide it. Later, he admitted the exclusion hurt. But instead of letting it go, he lashed out again, calling Kendrick a safe pick. That jab didn't go unnoticed either. Fans saw it as another moment where admiration turned to bitterness, where ego drowned out respect. Every time he gets close to greatness, it's like his pride won't let him stay there. Then came the low blow that made everyone shake their heads. His shot at Eminem. Game thought his diss track would break the internet, get people debating, and force M to step into the ring. But Eminem's reaction? Silence. Not a bar, not a post, not a single word. Just a light chuckle during an Instagram live, brushing it off like it was nothing. Fans went crazy, not for Game, but at him. They roasted him for trying way too hard to get a response. That moment sealed the truth people had been whispering for years. Game takes genuine respect and twists it into rivalry. He doesn't always start beef because there's real smoke. He does it because controversy keeps him relevant. It's his strategy, his addiction, and his curse all at once. Sometimes it works, sparking buzz and headlines. Other times it backfires, leaving him looking bitter and out of touch. But no matter how it plays out, the cycle always ends the same way. Game standing alone, surrounded by noise of his own making. He's one of the most talented rappers of his era, but his biggest enemy has never been 50 Cent, Eminem, or Kendrick Lamar. It's been himself. And every time you think he's done stirring the pot, another twist hits Game, proving that peace might just be the one thing he'll never make a hit out of. It all came crashing down again when Game got publicly called out by a rapper named Spar, who claimed he paid for a feature, But Game never delivered. The receipts started flying online, and soon after, a fan jumped in with a comment that went viral. Game charging $4,000 for a verse, bro is down bad. That one line spread like wildfire. To some, this wasn't the same Game who once stood tall as a proud West Coast giant. This looked like an artist just trying to stay afloat in a game that had moved on. The accusations piled up quick, and each new claim made the gap between his glory days and his current reality look wider and sadder. Some people brushed it off as just business, but others saw it as a sign of desperation. Either way, the picture being painted wasn't what anyone expected. The man who once repped Compton with unshakable pride was now being questioned in ways fans never thought they'd see. But the money drama wasn't even the biggest issue. It was just the surface. The real problem was a habit that had been haunting him since day one: name dropping. And after the $4,000 verse controversy, that pattern became impossible to ignore. First, it was credibility, then loyalty, and now, reputation. At the heart of it all was Game's constant urge to bring up other legends every time he spoke. Here's where it got wild. Game publicly claimed he didn't need to name drop, but that's exactly what he's famous for. Over the years, he built his whole identity around mentioning heavyweights like Dr. Dre, 50 Cent, Eminem, Kanye, and Tupac. In the beginning, it felt genuine, a hungry rapper from Compton paying homage to the icons who inspired him. But over time, those shout-outs stopped feeling respectful and started sounding like strategy. Fans noticed, rappers noticed, memes started flooding timelines. What used to sound like love turned into a running joke. The same people who once praised him started clowning him for name-dropping in every verse. Instead of standing tall on his own legacy, Game started to look like he was leaning on others just to keep his name in rotation. The vibe completely shifted. People weren't asking if Game was still one of the best lyricists from the West. They were asking if he even knew who Game was without someone else's name in his bars. What began as homage slowly turned into ridicule. His name drops weren't harmless anymore. They became part of his story, shaping how people saw him. From Dre to 50, from Pac to M, every mention came with new contradictions and endless debates. Fans and peers started dissecting every lyric, every interview, every post, trying to figure out where the truth ended and the exaggeration began. The more Game talked, the more closely people listened, but not because they believed him, because they were checking him. Every boast was compared to his past. Every story was fact-checked like a headline. What once felt like myth-making, like the art of building your own legend, started to look like myth-stretching. And that brings it all to one powerful question. How will Game's legacy be remembered? Will people look back and see a lyrical monster, a Compton storyteller who helped bring West Coast rap back to the mainstream when it was fading? A man who stood next to giants like Dre and 50 and still carved his own lane? Or will his name forever be tied to controversy? The contradictions, the exaggerations, the endless drama that seemed to follow him everywhere. The truth? It's both. Game's career is a wild cocktail of raw talent, cultural impact, and messy storytelling. He's got the skill, no question. But his need to rewrite, exaggerate, and attach himself to others keeps muddying the waters. It's like two versions of him exist: the rapper with undeniable bars and the man trapped in his own headlines. Thanks for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe and see you in the next video.